Everyone. This is Michele Clare. Welcome to Grief to Growth, my inaugural podcast episode. And Michele is a certified evidential medium, intuitive life coach, I should say, and has had more than one near-death experience. And when I say that Michele is an evidential medium, I mean that Michele delivers message with evidence that she's connecting to your loved one. I met Michele when she was doing her certification process. And I was one of Michele's test sitters, and she did an excellent job. And we've been in contact since then. One thing Michele says is we are being helped and guided from the other side, and that if we could see souls instead of bodies, the illusion that our loved ones have disappeared would vanish. So with that, I want to welcome Michele. And if you could, I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about your near-death experiences.
Yeah. Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for having me. Well, I've had 3 near-death experiences, and each one of them has been very individual and very unique. None of them was I going to the light and doing those things that you normally hear about. The first one actually happened in April 2000, and I was at a hospital because my niece had just been born that day, and I had a seizure out of the blue. And so during that seizure, what I remember is laying with my head in my grandma's lap, and she had passed a few years before that. And I was on the ground. She was kneeling next to me, so my head was in her lap. And I was looking up at this angel standing next to her who was honestly about 14 feet tall. And I had always known they were big, but I had never seen one, and I was not imagining it to be that big. And so as I was looking at it, I thought in my head, I was thinking, what is your name? And she answered me in her head. She said her name was Madeline. And I honestly had never felt so much love before in my life, not just from the angel, but from my grandma and from the whole place that I was. I was really focused at that time on just my grandma and the angel, so I wasn't really aware of everything around me. But the love was unbelievable, and I just remember the level of peace isn't even a level that we have words for here, and contentment and not needing anything. It was just amazing. So
did you have any feeling of transition? I mean, you were just here and then you were there?
Yeah, it was just that fast. So there was no transition. I was just like standing one minute, and the next minute I was laying with my head in my grandma's lap. And so as I was there, I don't know how long I felt like I was there, but what brought me back was I heard them yelling, code, 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 because I was in the hospital and I had stopped breathing. So when they started yelling code, it's what kind of woke me up and brought me back. So it began and ended very quickly. Like I was just there and then I was just here. I don't remember any transition back or forth between those two dimensions.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how long ago was that?
So that was in 2000, April 2000. So
Okay.
19 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. And then in May 2006, I had another one. And that one was, I was having surgery after I had my son. I had had a lot of complications. So I was about 6 weeks out of delivering him. And I had to go in for a surgery. And they actually ruptured through my uterus and missed my aorta by less than 1 millimeter. So during that time, this experience starts. It was supposed to be a 45-minute procedure. It turns into a 3.5-hour emergency procedure. But what I remember from that is laying on the gurney, and I see my white shepherd. I had a German shepherd that I loved so much. She's like my soul dog, that one, right? And she had passed a few years before that too. And she comes up and she just lays her head on the gurney looking at me. And she always did that at night. I'd wake up at night when she was here and she'd just be checking on me, And I see her. And so the next thing I know, we are on this phenomenal island and we are just running, jogging along the beach and running and running. And what I'm aware of is there is no time. It's literally each breath, each step that I'm taking. There's nothing before, there's nothing after. I am not worried about anything. I do not know how I got here. And we're running and running. And the other thing that is interesting is I notice we never get tired or hot or thirsty. and here's the funny thing about that for people who talk about near-death experiences as maybe not being real. My idea of heaven would never be running. I always tell my friends, if you see me running, call 911. This is an emergency. I'm not out for a jog, right? So it was really funny that was my near-death experience, is running on this beach. One of the things, though, about being on that beach is I remember I could look down around and kind of see where the island started curving. And I remember I was not allowed to go. I wasn't supposed to go around that curve. So my dog was there just to keep me company. And
but there was like a barrier that you weren't supposed to cross. And that's pretty common in near-death experiences.
Yeah. So I just knew it, and there was nothing, I didn't find, it wasn't upsetting or anything like that. It just was what it was. And really what I took away from that, I always call that one my eternal moment, because that was the first time that I really remember feeling eternity and no time all at the same time. There was nothing there that I needed to worry about. And that contentment, that love, that peace, that joy, the feelings we really don't even have words for in our language that were surrounding me. It was beautiful.
Just being in the moment and that's I think it's difficult for us to understand when people have near-death experience say there's no time. It's for us that live in time and usually under such time pressure to just understand that eternal now is a difficult concept.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And had I not experienced that, I'm not sure that I would understand that.
Right.
But the only way I really can describe it is think about when you're going for a walk. If it was only each breath you took, each step you took, that was it. Nothing before, not the step before, not the step after. That is what it felt like.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then imagine peace and joy and contentment and all these amazing feelings and no worry, no cares. That was, it's amazing I came back. It was a good thing I didn't go around the corner, I guess. So that was my second one. And once again, I don't remember, transitioning back into my body. I just remember then waking up from surgery in the recovery room.
Okay.
And then my third one was in November 2011, which is actually also when a lot of this big mediumship stuff started happening for me. I was up on my ceilings are 14 feet tall in my kitchen, and I was up on a 12-foot ladder. We have candles that have batteries in them, and they pop on every night, at the same time. So I was changing the batteries, and I have 3 kids. My younger 2 were home. They were 5 and 8 at the time. And I felt the ladder start to shift, and I knew I was going to fall, and it went down. And as it went down, I hit the back of my head on the corner of my granite kitchen island. And I had a 5.5-inch skull fracture, a brain bleed. I missed my brainstem by 1/2 inch. I lost my taste, my smell, my hearing, my equilibrium. I had a lot of issues, but that was my third one. And at that time, what I remember is I was actually almost over one of the counters in my kitchen, and I was watching myself fall. And I remember there were three beings there, 2 males, 1 female. And at the time, I did not know that they were life guides. I just thought they were people. Once again, that love and that peace and that timeless feeling. And basically at that point, I was given the choice that I could stay or I could go. And it was really interesting to me because as I'm making this decision, I'm watching myself fall off the ladder, and I'm thinking, my body's going to hit the ground in about a second. And yet there was no urgency. I literally felt like I had forever to make that decision on what I wanted to do. And I remember at the time thinking, that is really strange. How can I, take as long as I want when I have 1 second? Anyway, at that point in time, I also could see my 5-year-old son who was watching me fall off the ladder, and my 8-year-old, and seeing them there. And, I think it would be really hard for any parent to be able to see their children and then decide to go knowing that you're going to leave them in that type of situation. And so I chose to stay, obviously. The funny thing is, in hindsight, sometimes I think, maybe God used reverse psychology on me in that moment. Like he wanted me to think I had a choice, right? So he's like, here, but we'll show you your kids, and then we know you won't really make that choice, but you'll think you had one, So I don't know how that worked out. But after that head injury, I got back home about 10 days later from being in the hospital, and my son, who was 5, so my head injury happened on 11/1/11. So people who like numbers like that, because it's a lot of ones. My son, in January, I guess it was, so January 2012, when I started to look more normal, look like things were going to be okay. And he was 5. He started telling people, I didn't need to be there when Mom had her accident. Sophie could have done it, because Sophie's the one who called 911. And we thought he had tried and it hadn't gone through. So he started getting really depressed. And we'd say, Josh, you open the door for the policeman, and just try to build him up. There was nothing we could say. Let me backtrack for just a moment. I was 12 years old when my grandfather passed. And when I was 12, I did recognize I had a connection with him that still went on, and communication with him. And at that point in time, I would tell my mom, well, Grandpa says, and she would say, well, I know you think he would say that if he was here, and so it just kind of went on like that. And I never really thought much about it, because it was really natural, and it didn't happen outside of just information that maybe I would need to know. So it was just kind of part of life. So my head injury, this is my grandfather who passed in 2012. The end of January, my grandfather came through to me, and this is my first big visit from my head injury, and actually probably my biggest one ever for myself. He actually manifested in front of me, which normally I do not see people. They don't manifest for me. Most people, some mediums see that. That's not me. I get most of my information through feeling. But he manifested in front of me. He started talking about my accident. He started talking about my son. And then he said to me, you should get the 911 recording. There's something on there you should know. And I thought, wow, it was just actually almost too much, all of that at once. So I did. I requested it. I had never thought of getting the 911 recording, and I don't think anyone else had ever mentioned it to me. I requested it. It took 2 weeks to come. And then when it came, I played it, and there's call number 1. Call number 1 was my son's call. It actually did go through. Okay. And you hear his little broken voice. The operator says, 911, what's your emergency? And he says, Sophie, what do I say? And then he lays down the phone. So I think he called literally as it happened, and the trauma of that moment, he had forgotten actually that he called.
Oh, okay.
So then you hear the operator for about 1.5 minutes trying to get their attention. You can hear them talking in the background. And at one point, my son tells my daughter he's going to go push the panic button on the house alarm. And she says, hold on, let me try calling 911 first. And she hangs up the phone, and then her call goes through.
Okay.
So they both of their calls went through.
Right.
So it was unbelievable. And I would have never known that had my grandfather not come through in the way that he did. So when my son came home from kindergarten that day, I told him, I said, Josh, your call went through. And it was like I lifted a 10,000-pound weight off this kid's shoulders. And you just saw like his sense of self-worth and his feeling of I'm a capable being all just come flooding back into him. And I'm telling you, it changed the course of his life.
Wow.
And my grandfather never walked this earth when he was here. So if you want to, they should never have even met, right?
Well, that brings up an interesting point that, when our loved ones cross over, we kind of feel like they're out of our lives. But your grandfather, who had never met your son, was clearly aware of what's going on here in the here and now.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the most amazing parts of that visit for me was, I guess I always realized he was connected to me, but I did not realize up until that moment that he's not just connected to me, he's connected to all of my loved ones, to his loved ones, and to what is going on in our present moment.
Yeah. So you had three different NDEs. Another thing I kind of gathered from your NDEs, they're all very different. And some people will say, well, NDEs are just an illusion because people see different things. But I believe that NDEs are tailored to what we need. And I think your experiences kind of proved that, right? Each one was so different, but each one gave you something that you really needed.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and I do think, here's the thing, when people are having seizures, most people don't report any memories during that time because your brain's literally going haywire, right? You have
Right.
all of these. And so the fact that I would be able to have this huge seizure that was so big that I stopped breathing and they were calling a code, and yet come back with these very vivid memories of feelings and what I saw, that doesn't even compute that you would be able to do that.
Right. Absolutely. So you did indicate that you saw spirit some before any of these things happened. You said your
Mm-hmm.
grandfather you had a connection with when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
But would you say your abilities were enhanced after one or more of your NDEs?
Absolutely. I think, on that first one that I had when I saw my grandma and the angel, I feel like that one really just opened up more of my connection to the angel realm. And then I was able also, I had been able to communicate with my grandma too. So I think that enhanced that. The second one I had with my dog, I'm not sure. Part of me feels like that one was just so I could realize what eternity really, really felt like and
Mm-hmm.
absorb that, and
Mm-hmm.
also be able to realize the peace and the love and the completeness and the non-judgment and all of these amazing things that are there waiting for us. It almost ended up being more of like a little mini soul vacation, I guess,
Yeah.
because I think about it like my body was down here going through trauma, and I'm sure it was chaos, at that time in the operating room, or controlled chaos. I don't, however you
Mm-hmm.
want to think about it. And yet my soul was able to go to this place where it just didn't even matter anymore,
Yeah.
you know? And then
Yeah.
my last one, obviously, I do believe on that one, the things that I brought back that I remember, I did not know. I was in my mind and my body here that I was going to come back, working as a medium. But I do believe on it that NDEs happen on levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I believe what I know happened here, and this is what I bring back with me. But I also believe there are higher soul level decisions that are being made between me and God, or the universe, or source, or however you want to
Mm-hmm.
name the higher power, right? And decisions that are being made, maybe for the highest good, which I might not. For me, in my mind and my body, that was coming back to raise my kids, right? It was going to
Yeah.
be the highest good. But obviously there were decisions made that I don't remember that actually were probably even for a higher good than me being able to raise my kids.
Yeah. So, so you came back after the third one. Your abilities, I think, were opened up even more. When did you actually decide to become a medium?
It took me a couple years after that. And I'll tell you why. At first, I was a little bit nervous when I started getting information for other people. As long as it was for me, it didn't matter, right? Because I could just, keep that between myself. But the information I started getting for other people and then feeling the need to share it with them is kind of what started pushing me out of my comfort zone. And I also was not raised in an area that was really comfortable with this too. I
Right.
was I was raised Catholic. Here's the really good part about being raised Catholic is you are raised to ask Mary and the angels and saints, and you have all these people and beings that you can ask for help, right? So that part was really good for me. But my mom was always, when I tell her about this, worried like, well, if there's good, there's evil. Aren't you afraid you're going to bring the evil in? And she kind of
Yeah.
brought that
Yeah.
fear with her. And then for my husband, he was raised Baptist, and for him, that was just very scary, right?
Yeah.
It just goes against everything that he believes should even be allowed to happen.
Right. Right. So how's
So
your husband with it now?
I would say he is supportive, but he's not. Yeah, he would never ask me to read for him. If he says, "How'd your days go?" He just really wants to know good or bad. Like,
Yeah.
don't tell
Yeah.
me any details. So he's a work in progress. We're moving forward. But
Yeah,
it's
I was raised fundamentalist Christian, so I can understand that. And I remember when I first even started doing yoga, some of my friends freaked out because they said, like you said, I was like, well, I'm opening up, I'm connecting with spirit, and they're like, well, if you're opening up to good spirits, you could be opening up to bad spirits too. So
right.
I can understand that. But it's
Hmm.
interesting you talk about the Catholic and being able to speak out or reach out to angels and Mary and other beings, because that's something we didn't have in my tradition, and I hear a lot of people talking about that now. So that was the
Right.
advantage I think you had.
Absolutely, because I always felt like there was a whole level of beings of light that were willing to help and wanted to help. And So that part came natural. So now, when I work with the angels or when I get information on higher levels, well, of course, because it just feels natural. They were always there. They always wanted to help. You just have to ask. And I do believe that no matter what you're raised or not raised to believe. I mean, the levels of help and love and light that are available to all of us are truly more than we could imagine.
Wow. So what about like spirit guides or guides? Do we all have guides? Do we have more than one guide?
Yes, we all have guides. We all have at least one main guide that will stay with you for your entire life. Kind of like you're the guy in charge of your path, right? Or female, whoever. And so you'll always have at least one that stays with you the whole time. It's my understanding, though, that there will be others that rotate in depending on, what your challenge is at that point in time, what the mission is you want to accomplish, almost like they kind of specialize in certain areas, right? So if you're working on, okay, I'm going to start this business, well, then you have a business life guide kind of come in and help you grow it. So I was not raised with life guides, and I actually didn't even know at my third near-death experience that those were my life guides. It wasn't until later on that I was able to connect those dots. But interestingly enough, we had never used that word around my kids because it wasn't even a word I used. And when my son was 5 years old, so this was after my accident, and I was sitting there having lunch with him, and I was so tired of not being able to taste my food. It was just a filling in your mouth, right? And then also there's something called phantom taste and smell, and I would get that, and that was horrible. It was like rotting, burning bodies is what I would taste if I tasted something. So I was sitting there with him, and I said, Josh, when do you think I'm going to get my taste and smell back? More just like talking out loud, And he said, well, you need to pray about it more. And I said, who told you that? Because I knew it was going to be my very good Catholic mom, right?
Yeah.
And he looks at me and he says, my life guide, Hansen. And
oh, wow.
I about fell out of my chair because that was not a word we had ever used or he would have ever heard. And I said, your life guide, Hansen, nor did we know anyone with that as a first or last name. This came from him. And I said, well, what does he look like? And he said, well, he's tall like Dad, and he has brown hair and brown eyes. And he said, and Hansen says, you just need to pray about it more. And I was like, okay. And, the Catholic in me, I'm like, let's go. All right, let's get that taste and smell back, right? But it was just really amazing to me because in a way, even though I had met my life guides, my son who was 5 knew his, and I still didn't know mine.
Wow. So do you think kids are more connected than we are? Or do you think we kind of grow out of that? Or
I absolutely think we grow out of that. I think, kids come in here when you're around infants, and they're looking at ceilings and they're laughing at no one standing behind you. And, I think we all come in here with this connection. And then what happens is the world tells us, no, you're not seeing that. That's not happening. This is what we believe. And we let the world shape us intentionally or unintentionally. And so by doing that, what happens is we start disconnecting these channels that we came in here with.
Wow. So did you become a medium first or a life coach first? I think it's a very interesting, intriguing combination of things to be a medium and a life coach.
Yeah. Well, so then what happened, a couple years after my head injury, I started mentoring with Jamie Clark, and I mentored with him for 3 years. And that was just because I didn't know anyone who could help guide me and help me understand information I was getting, or maybe how to word it, or even, I just didn't know anyone. So he is a phenomenal mentor, and very helpful at helping me understand where I was going with this. So that's where I started working on being able to connect. Also, at first, I will tell you, I was a little bit worried about kind of the on-demand part of it, because for the first year, a lot of that information, I'd just be walking, wherever, and boom, it would hit me. But I wasn't sure that I could sit down and still access that same information. So was
it hitting you like people you meet on the street or in restaurants or something, or you would just get information about them?
Yeah, it would. Mostly it was people that I knew that I could give the information to. But sometimes it would be people I didn't know. And honestly, I wouldn't always give that information.
Sure.
And even today, I don't, if that happens, which it doesn't usually happen, but if it does happen, I really have to read the situation before I would walk up to someone and give them information, because you can do a lot more harm than good depending on where that person is in their life and what they believe,
Sure.
So I did the mentoring with Jamie, and that's where the mediumship really started to grow. And then as far as the life coaching, I call it intuitive life coaching because I have not taken a specific class, but what I do with that is I literally reach out to your angels, your guides, higher level of wisdom when I'm working with someone, and I say, okay, where do we need to go from here? What does this path look like? What do you believe is the best option, or what direction should this person be going in to fulfill their soul's purpose, and stuff
So
like
you're
that.
like a channel for their angels or their guides, right? So you're providing that connection for them. Is that what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And and it really works out well, because what happens is people then begin to start connecting on their own. If I tell them, I don't always get names, but when I'm talking about life guides, or even angels, I'll say it's kind of similar to this. My kids call my dad Boppy instead of Grandpa, and he answers to it just fine. We all know when they say Boppy, they mean my dad, Grandpa, right? And I feel like it's very similar for your life guides and your angels. If you don't get a name that comes to you, name them what you want. We know who you're talking about. They still meet you with love. They're happy to help, so I think that's part of it, is just making that connection and being aware that you have them. But then when I'm able to say, okay, and also your life guides are saying this, or your angels are saying this, then it really helps people feel that connection and start working on it for themselves.
Now, we all have life guides, but most of us are unaware of it. So can they help us if we don't ask them? Should we ask them? Should we try to reach out to them?
I do believe in free will. I really do. So I do believe we need to ask for that help. Otherwise, we'd basically just be puppets down here, and they'd be doing what they want with us, right? Here's the thing about asking for help. I believe we really only have to ask them once. If you ask them, like, will you please come into my life? You're not just saying like today to the next hour. If you ask them into your life once, I believe that's enough for them. But it's usually not enough for us as a human, because we forget that we've invited them in and we've asked for help. So on our end of it, I think it takes some of us asking every day for a while to remember, oh yeah, I have help. I'm not alone in this. But on their end, I believe we only have to, extend the invitation one time.
Okay, cool. So with your intuitive abilities, do you have the ability to like see the future? I know some people are kind of, I don't know what you call that, but psychic in a way of seeing the future.
Right. For me, I get feelings. That's my main information. So sometimes if somebody says, I don't know if I should do A or B, I'll definitely feel a pull. Oh, it should be B. It should be this choice, So that's part of it. And then the other thing is, a lot of times their loved ones will come through. So I had one lady I was reading for, and she was offered like a lateral move in her job. And she said, I don't want to take it. I don't want to take it. And I said, okay, well, then you have free will. Don't take it. But I'm telling you, your loved ones and your guides are saying, take it, because I was getting that information from them. And she's like, but I don't want to take it. Okay, you don't have to. I'm just giving you the information,
Right.
So she decides to go ahead and follow their guidance and take it. 2 weeks later, the company got rid of her job, and she would have been unemployed had she not made that lateral move.
Okay.
So that was all, kudos to her for following the advice they were giving her, because that's why she came to me. She wanted to know what they had to say.
Right.
And I told her, but having said that, I knew at the time that was the best option for her, because that's what they were telling me. But I didn't see that in 2 weeks she would lose her job if she didn't take it.
So it's not a specific outcome. It's more like this is kind of a nudge, the direction you should go, and it might work out to be an easier path.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, I'm not sure how much of life really is etched in stone. I really think that we are always given a lot of options. We just don't usually realize it.
Yeah, there's that whole thing about free will versus predestination, and do we have soul plans, and what are your thoughts on that?
So, I really do feel like we come in here with a plan. I do believe that, we can obviously detour off our plan. And I don't necessarily think that's wrong, because in all of my 3 near-death experiences, I was never once like, hey, you took the wrong turn back there. You were supposed to be doing this, So I don't necessarily think it's wrong if you do tour off your plan. But I do believe that life will try to provide you opportunities, or your life guides, your angels, however you want to look at it, to get back on course. Because I do think we come here to learn and to grow. It really is like the classroom of life. So I think we come here with the best intentions, and then sometimes things change. And I think, that life happens. I also am someone, I believe in accidents. I do believe we live on earth and it's not a perfect world. And I believe accidents happen. I do not believe every, car accident on the street was planned or supposed to happen for a reason. I just don't. And there are people who will disagree with me, and that's fine. That's just kind of my view. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to another medium, and she was telling me that she believes the moment you are born and the moment you die are etched in stone, and everything in between is what you do. And I thought that was interesting, because I don't necessarily feel that way either. And the more I've thought about it, the more I really don't agree with that, in the sense, even though I love her and she's amazing, but because listen, we have 7.5 billion souls on this planet. Each soul, no matter what you choose, if you choose religion or spirituality or no religion, you're all on your own path to God, to home, right? And so I don't believe that 7.5 billion people would transition the exact same way when we all have such a unique path in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me.
I think it's one of those questions that's kind of above our pay grade. I think a lot of us wrestle with that, and I think it's maybe, we think it's either or maybe it's kind of both. And I think, I think things work out for the best. I do believe that. I believe that everything that happens will eventually, I know everything that happens will eventually work out for the best, because we're all eventually going to end up back home. So it will be okay in the end. But I see people get so caught up on, the free will versus predetermination or predestination. And I don't know that we really even need to know the answer to that while we're here.
Yeah, exactly. And if you spend your time worrying about that instead of living life, then that's a problem too. What was interesting, and I really haven't shared this with anyone, but just last week I was presented with an opportunity to do mediumship on a bigger, level. And at first I was like, yes. And then I started thinking about it, and it honestly, it kind of scared me. I was like, oh my gosh, that might be, that's definitely out of my comfort zone. What will that bring to my family life? What will that look like? And I started getting a little anxious. And Spirit, so boldly, so clearly said to me, and it was like smacked me in the face with it. Spirit said, "You're not afraid to die. You're afraid to live."
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh, that's so true. I am not afraid to die at all, but yes, it is scary to live. And then to take that the step further, actually, none of us came here to die. We all came here to live.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
And so we all know we're going home. So what are we going to do between now and then? So it was interesting, because sometimes I get in my own head, and then Spirit's like, smack. Okay. And here's the truth of the situation.
I can so relate to that, because with me starting up this podcast and starting up the new business and everything. And I realized the other day, in fact, I started a blog post. I haven't finished it yet. And I called it Fear of Success or Fear of Failure. And it's kind of like a little bit of both, right? You're scared to do things because you're scared it might not work. But then when you start to see a little bit of success for some weird reason, there's kind of a fear of that too. What if this really does take off? What if it really does go in the direction that I wanted to go? I don't know why there's a fear of that, but I think a lot of us have it.
Yeah, I think so too. And I just think it's interesting in a way that, we do come here to live, and then we're afraid to live when we're here. It kind of, in a way, talks on the level about how we really are souls and spiritual beings having a human experience, because our comfort zone is at home. It's in that love and that compassion and that non-judgmental place with no time, right? It's not here where there's time and there are judgmental people and we're being pushed out of our comfort zone. I really think it speaks to just having that human experience.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I'm really glad you brought that up. And like I said, that's personally very helpful to me with what I'm going through, right now. And sometimes you feel like I said, I was launching this podcast last week and started to get a few people, share it and things like that. I'm like, what if it really takes off?
Right.
It's a little bit of fear just pushing that button to even launch it. But I think as human beings, one of the things we're here to do is to overcome that fear. is
Mm-hmm.
to, I think we're supposed to have that fear and have something to kind of push back against. But
Right.
part of the experience of being here is saying, let's go ahead and go for it anyway and step out, and see what happens. And, going back to the predestination thing, I think, like I said, we don't know whether it's one way or the other, whether
Right.
everything is planned, but having the faith that no matter what happens, it's going to be okay. That's the
Mm-hmm.
faith I think we're supposed to have.
Exactly. And what if it's both? What if some
Right.
souls come here with predestination and others say, no, this time I want to come and do it my own way. And, I think that's another thing as humans, right? We're always limiting ourselves. It's either going to be option A, B, or C. And God's like, but what about D, E, F, G, H, I, and
Right.
there's so many other options. And we're thinking, no, it's going to be this or that. But we limit ourselves every single
Well,
day.
there's so many things just as humans with the brains we have, we just can understand, like the whole idea of time, that the other side is timeless. I still wrestle with what does that really mean? And, there's no clocks and there's no calendars, but things do happen, right? So
Right.
there are events, and since we can't remember what it's like to be there, we wrestle with that. And then some people will say, well, then since I can't understand it, it's impossible. And
Right.
I think it's kind of the same thing with the whole free will versus predestination. We think it has to be one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe it's both. Maybe it's that everything's going to work out just fine, but it may not work out exactly in the order that you expected it to.
That is my life story. Nothing ever happens on my timing. I have plans. I have timing. No, it doesn't seem to work that way. Right. But yeah, exactly. I think it will all work out. And in hindsight, maybe not until we're on the other side will we see that. But I do believe most people come here, and most souls come here, and they are successful on their journey, and maybe even beyond what they had hoped for. We
Mm-hmm.
just don't know that on this side.
Yeah. So what do you think about reincarnation? Do you think we come once? Do we come back more than once? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, okay. So I have, my thought really is this: God comes, I say God, right? But when I say God, I mean source, one, the divine, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
universe, whatever resonates with people. I'm just used to saying the word God.
Yeah.
I believe everything that God does comes from love. And, and so for some, I believe some souls, if they're like, hey, I'm one and done, one time there's enough, I'm never going back, I think God would say, okay, I love you. Stay here where you're comfortable. I think if another soul says, oh my gosh, that was amazing, I learned so much, I'm going back 1,000 more times, I think God says, okay, I love you. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So I think it's very individual. And I think we have to be careful when we make really big blanket statements. I think the illusion of life on earth, right? We're very much in the illusion of it right now.
Yeah.
I think that it overwhelms us, but think of it on a soul level. If you're up there and you're with your soul family and your best friends, and they're kind of like, hey, let's go do this. And it's really actually less than 5 minutes because there's no time where you are. You're probably like, okay, that sounds great. I'm in, I'll be there. Right.
Yeah.
And so maybe you go in to learn that lesson. And I'll tell you something that's funny. I was talking to my son, and we were talking about kind of like life and the connection to your loved ones on the other side. And I said, how all the kids are on Xboxes nowadays and they have their headphones in and they're sitting there screaming at their friends who are across town playing the same game, right?
Mm-hmm.
I said to him, okay, Josh, so it's like this. Imagine you sitting in the chair with your headphones on and the remote controller in your hand is your soul, right? Mm-hmm. And you decide, hey, this time I'm going to go on and I'm going to play whatever this is. I'm going to play Fortnite. I'm going to play whatever this game is. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to get on my team, my buddy from here, 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 and here. And they all get on their controllers and they go in as a team to play that game, right?
Yeah.
So, but his soul is in control, sitting in the chair with the headphones on and the remote, but he's watching this. My gosh, I hear my kids screaming in there. You would think there really is a sniper in the room or whatever, the way he's and screaming, right? And screaming at his friends. And then if his character gets killed, oh my gosh, right? Explosion. Like, I can't believe that. But the whole time, we know that it's really a game. And that's his main soul sitting there. So I said to him, imagine if this is your headphones are your loved ones from heaven, and they're trying to whisper to you, watch out for the sniper up there around the corner, watch out for this, and so you have the support team that's trying to help you. Meanwhile, you're so into what feels so real, which is this game on TV that's going to end. And I said, so think of me, Josh, I'm like the headphones. I'm telling you what your loved ones are saying. He's like, oh, so you're the input, Mom. I'm like, okay, I guess if that's what you want, your connection. But so I do think when I watch him play that, it kind of reminds me of how I think this life really is. I think there's a part of us that is fine and whole and has chosen to come here with our friends and said, hey, this will be fun. I'll get on the Xbox at this time on this day. Let's do this. And then we come in and maybe we don't see the sniper around the corner. We don't see the landmine, or we don't see, but whether we see it or not, we are always loved and supported. And at some level have kind of volunteered for this game.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I've thought of similar ones, but that one, I love the way you put that. I think that's excellent. But I remember talking reincarnation with a friend several years ago, and this was a group of people who were kind of coming out of Christianity, I guess. So this whole idea of reincarnation was new to us. And she said when she heard about reincarnation, she just started crying because she had had such a tough life, and she had. Right. And she's like, I will never do this again. And I think about with myself and a lot of people I deal with, we've lost children. Mm-hmm. When you hear that we've planned this, so we thought of, and I'm looking at a picture of Shana right here, my other monitor, and I can just see Shana going, yeah, let's do this. It'll be fun. I'm only going to be there for 15 years, but then I'm going to leave, and then you're going to do this and this and this, and then we'll be back. And that's what gets me through my day, is knowing that, she's safe, that she's just kind of like gone on ahead. And we used to play Mario Brothers. So, the example you were giving, the four of us loved to just sit down and play Mario Brothers for hours. And Shane would have like infinite number of lives because she was the best game player ever. When you go off the cliff in Mario Brothers, you don't cry about it, right? It's like he just regenerates and he comes right back. Yeah. But we get so caught up in this life, as you said, the illusion, the veil that we're behind, which I believe the veil is actually our bodies, that when we come into our bodies, that's the veil.
I think you're right.
That we can't remember. And so some of us are trying to remember and wake up and try to help other people to remember. So it takes the edge off. If you can get to that point, things still hurt.
Oh yeah.
Things still happen that we don't want to happen. And it's not to say there aren't bad things, but ultimately they'll all be okay.
Right. And also I would say, whether we realize it or not, we are okay. Because what I realize when I work with people is no matter what state you're in physically in this world, your soul is always whole.
Yeah.
So the true you is always okay. And we have evidence now of mediums who are able to connect with, say, people who are nonverbal or who have Alzheimer's or whatever, right? Yeah. So their bodies to us look totally like broken down. But guess what? When their soul comes through, it happened in a group reading for us just a couple weeks ago. I saw it happen with a lady's father. And what the other medium I was working with, because we were doing a group, said, I have your dad. And she said, no, you couldn't. He's got Alzheimer's. And I said, no, actually, she does have your dad. I could feel that connection. And he was able to communicate. So on a soul level, we're always fine, whether we realize it on an earthly physical level or not.
That is so great. And I want to talk about that a little bit more, because both of my in-laws dealt with Alzheimer's. My father-in-law passed from Alzheimer's. My mother-in-law is going through it now. Mm-hmm. And my mother-in-law is just not the person that she was. I mean, her personality has changed. And I won't go into any details, but she's just not the person that she was. Right. And it's really hard for us to remember, as you said, her soul is still whole. Mm-hmm. So when a medium can make that connection, and I've heard about mediums making connections with people who are in comas or nonverbal, but not someone with Alzheimer's. That's really interesting.
Yeah. It's phenomenal. And it also shows you how no matter what your body's doing, your soul's still evolving and growing. Right. Yeah. So sometimes we look at people and they're in a vegetative state and we think, we imagine their soul's just like in this standstill, not doing anything. That's not true. Just because your body's in a standstill doesn't mean your soul's not still evolving and growing and doing things. I had a friend who had brain surgery, and I was in the kitchen cooking dinner for my kids, and I looked at the clock and she was in surgery at that time. Mm-hmm. And as I was cooking, I heard her voice come to me, and she said, "It's amazing over here, but it's not my time yet."
Oh, wow.
And And I about dropped everything I was doing because I hadn't had that happen before. Because my first thought was like, oh my gosh, did she transition? Like, how am I making this connection? No, she was in surgery. She came out of surgery. She survived, another 6 months or so after that. She did not have a recognition of what happened
Right.
of that meeting. But it just goes to show you that even while she was in surgery, her soul was able to connect with me and tell me it's amazing over there, but it wasn't her time.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. I was talking with someone the other day about consciousness, and my theory is that we're never unconscious. And we're talking about, I said, when you sleep, you dream. You still have brain activity. You're still having events going on. You just don't always remember your dreams. And sometimes they come back to you later. And someone said, well, what about when you're under anesthesia? And I'm like, we can't say what people under anesthesia actually experience. We can say what they remember, which is usually nothing. But, the case with your friend makes the case for, maybe when we're under anesthesia and that consciousness is not connected to our brain anymore, our consciousness is free. So those people could be exploring things that we have no idea about.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, one of my near-death experiences, I was under anesthesia, and yet I've had surgery a few times. I don't have any memory being under anesthesia, but that one, I came back with that really clear near-death experience. So I do believe our souls are always growing and evolving and experimenting, whether we are aware of that or not.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. I'm glad we touched on that, because I think that'll help some people. As I said, the viewpoint that you and I both share now, one of the goals with doing the podcast is to help other people to understand that, when I was growing up, we were taught, you have a soul. And we thought, well, when you die, then your soul will go to heaven or go to hell. And I think what it is we are souls. I mean, we are spirits that are connected to these bodies. And I love your video game illustration. And I think about the movie like Avatar. I think Avatar on so many levels was so brilliant, because they would get in and they would manipulate these bodies, remotely from sitting in their the little pods. I think that's kind of how our bodies are. Our bodies are just, they're receivers for our spirit, which is always fine, always still back at home. And our loved ones that have transitioned, that we think are gone, are still with us and still involved in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing about our loved ones being involved in our life that's interesting is sometimes when I read for people and I'll bring through their loved ones and they'll say, well, does that mean he's not okay if he's, right here giving you information? No, once you're in spirit, you're no longer confined to being in one place. So you can very much be fine and in that heavenly realm, and also right next to your loved ones and connected to what they're doing with their daily life and sending them signs. You don't have to choose to be one place or another like we do when we're in body.
Yeah, and there's some people that say, well, I shouldn't have medium readings because I don't want to bother them. Or I shouldn't think of them too much because I'm going to hold them back, keep them from crossing over. So what do you think about things like that?
I think that's us putting our human limitations on spirit, which is, I don't believe that's, accurate. I think, now here's the thing, not everyone will ever want to be read by a medium. I think it's a different time frame, right? Some people want to be read as soon as their loved ones die. Some people take years, some people never, so I think that it's more about what works for you. There's nothing that we as humans are going to do that are going to hold our loved one's spirit back from evolving and growing and, shining in its glorious light. And that's, that's like almost saying like, well, I shouldn't think about them every day because it's like when I do, I'm holding them back. No, you're not. They're like, oh, it's like texting them. I love you. I love you. I love you. And they're like, I love you too. I love you too.
Yeah.
It's not, we give ourselves a lot more power than we actually have. And so by thinking that we shouldn't connect with them and we shouldn't do this and that, we're going to hold them back. No, that's us wanting to be powerful humans, thinking we control more than we do.
Yeah, and that reminds me, you talk about the power, because I've heard other people talk about some people, when they transition, they can't cross into the light, and that we need to help them get through, they're they need our help, right? So what do you think about when people transition? Are they usually met by loved ones? I know your near-death experiences, they were each different, but those are near-death experiences. Those aren't like when someone actually transitions. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Well, so I do think not everyone transitions right into the light. And I've had a couple experiences with that. I think most people do transition just fine. I really do. But one example that I have is I have a friend's husband who committed suicide, and he was afraid that he was going to be judged. And so, it did take a while for him to make that transition. And then actually I'm not someone who deals much with paranormal in the sense of ghosts and haunting and things like that. But I was out in San Francisco at the Institute of Noetic Sciences and doing a study for them in February. And I took my daughter with me, my oldest. We walk into the hotel to check in at noon. And as soon as I walk in the door, I'm like, oh, this place is haunted. But I'm not specifically getting a person or an entity or a spirit. I just know. Mm-hmm. And so I say to myself, I'm like, well, I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to put that out there in the universe. I don't want to tell my daughter, right? So we go over, we do our experiment, and then we go to dinner. And we're talking, and she says, well, Mom, that hotel is haunted, right? Oh, and I said, well, how do you know that? And she's like, well, I can just tell. But she wasn't worried about it. So I'm like, okay, go back to the hotel that night. And it's about, 9 o'clock or something. And she's asleep on the bed because she's a teenager, and I'm in the shower. And I could tell I've been fighting with the thermostat. I kept turning it up. It kept dropping. Turn it up, drop, turn it up, drop, like nonstop. So I get in to take a shower. And all of a sudden, literally in the exact same second, the water turns ice cold and the lights in the bathroom go off. Wow. And I start screaming for my daughter, jump out, grab a towel, right? And I can see in my mind this very elderly old lady. And I realize that she's literally in between realms. She's not exactly here on earth, but she's certainly not, in heaven or in that higher level where she needs to be. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? Because that's not something I usually deal with. I will tell you this. What was interesting was she showed me herself is a hunched over elderly, like 80s, 90s year old lady walking with a cane. And yet at the same time, though, she was able to change the water temperature and turn the lights off at the exact same moment. So she really is kind of toggling between these two worlds, right? Because she's attached to this body, which she thinks she's, not healthy anymore. And yet she's a healthy whole spirit. So anyway, so my daughter gets up. The funny thing is, I'm like, oh my gosh, she just turned off the lights on me in the water. And she's like, okay. And she turns around and goes back to bed. Who does that? I just told you what happened. And she's just like, well, I knew you'd handle it, Mom. Okay, well, that's good. I'm glad you slept well. So anyway, I go to my bed and I just start praying, bringing in the light, calling in the angels. And what I can tell from this woman, the information I'm getting, is she's been in this hotel about 50 years per time. I have no idea how long that is, on what she was feeling.
Right.
And she's afraid. She's really afraid to go into the light. And I think it's because she thinks she's going to be judged for something she did or didn't do. So I just start calling in the angels, calling in the light. I literally see them come in. I see them like kind of come beside her and start walking into the light. And I'm watching her from behind right now. And as she steps into the light, she goes from this hunched over woman to standing upright, young, takes one step and is gone.
Yeah. Now, I want to clarify something, what I said about that. I don't believe that everybody necessarily transfers or transitions directly into the light. I do believe that there are people that I think it's a self-imposed kind of a thing. Right. Where because of judgment or whatever issues, because I don't think once we die that we necessarily all of our issues are solved. And I do believe that some people need help. And I believe that there are angels and guides and people from the other side. And I think that's their job. Is to help some of those people through. So I do want to clarify that. I don't think it's all necessarily just like, they pop right in, but I'm just talking about the power that we earthlings sometimes give ourselves. Because in your case, what you did was you called in intermediaries, right? It wasn't your power that transitioned during the light, but you were there to be kind of a vessel for them to come through.
Yeah, almost just to encourage her. I just remember I kept telling to her, "You're okay. It's going to be okay. Go into the light." But any medium or healer or any person like that tells you they're doing it themselves, I don't believe that is true. Nothing I do is me. It's always coming from a higher source.
Yeah.
I mean, that's for me specifically. That's how I felt. And so, you're right. I could not transition her, as Michele, but I could call in beings of light who could help her to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So Michele, Tell us about how people that are listening, how can they reach you? What are the services that you offer?
Yeah, so I offer any psychic medium and intuitive life coaching services, obviously some angel communication and things like that. And you
Hmm.
can just go to my website, Michele Clare, it's CLARE.net.
Okay. And then you're involved with something called I Empowerment. Can you tell me a little bit
Yes.
more about what that is? I've seen it on Facebook with you, but what is that?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about I Empowerment. It is a collaboration of people that have come together, and most of them are pretty well known in the Phoenix area, at least.
Hmm.
And we're really focusing on the body, mind, spirit connection.
Hmm.
So we have a team of people that does do the life coaching and the helping you to empower yourself, and then people that help you, with your body as far as eating right, and food carries different vibrations,
Hmm.
actually, things like that we didn't necessarily realize, and that organic food carries a higher vibration than non-organic and GMO and things like that. So we're really just trying to come together as a collaboration of people to help empower people to live their best life. And what we do is we have little weekend events here and there, and we're going to have a couple big ones a year, but we want to make it affordable and easy for you to access us. So instead of just having one huge event once a year that makes you feel good, and then the rest of the year you're on your own to figure out how you're going to do it, we try to empower you to help you, go each step of the way.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you very much for being the first guest of my podcast. I think
No,
it was a great episode. I learned a lot, and I think hopefully it'll help the people that are listening.
thank you. It's an honor to be on here with you. I admire you and everything that you do.
Thanks, Michele.